Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about incident reports. So incident reports are a type of informal report, which I've done a video about before. And basically, informal reports are typically quite short, usually less than 3 pages, probably 1 to 3 pages generally. And they tend to be internal documents. Incident reports fit that bill, right? They tend to be quite short and they tend to be for internal use primarily. However, incident reports are important because they may become significant externally. In particular, for legal investigations, liability issues, if there are sort of questions about the company's responsibility, something like for say safety, health, whatever it is, these documents may be used for that. So basically an incident report does exactly what it says on the tin, right? It is the documentation of a particular incident that has occurred. And typically this will be something like an injury on the job. It may be something like a conflict between workers or between a worker and a client. It may be something like a client or customer is injured. It may be some sort of issue with like infrastructure or whatever it is that's damaged. Say you have a factory and a particular machine breaks down, whatever it is, right? So basically anything that could have negative consequences for the company needs to be documented, even if it seems quite small. And also it's worth noting near misses should generally be documented, again, just for the purposes of making sure that that information is there, it's available in case there is an investigation, right? So let's say, for instance, you have an employee who they slip on some ice in the parking lot and they break their arm. You need an incident report of that, because if they subsequently say, I am filing a lawsuit because this was an unsafe set of working conditions, my injury is due to the company's negligence, here are my medical bills, they need to be covered, plus I need compensation for pain and suffering or whatever it is, right? Then you as a company need to be able to produce documentation in order to defend yourselves or to negotiate a settlement or whatever it is that the outcome of this lawsuit is going to be, right? So you need that documentation. And the standard way of doing this, the basic thing, is an incident report. That's at least the start, right? For some things, there's going to be more documentation that's necessary, but the basic thing is an incident report, right? So again, if someone is injured, if there is an interpersonal conflict, if something in the workplace is damaged or malfunctions or whatever it is, if there's an incident like harassment or something like this, all of that needs to be documented. And with incident reports, different companies, organizations, institutions, whatever it is, will have their own different templates, right? So I work at Penn State, and different offices or groups or whatever it is within Penn State will have their own incident reports. I show a couple of them to my students. My partner works for Girl Scouts in the heart of Pennsylvania. They have an incident report form, right, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a standard thing. Across the board, there are certain fundamental things that you want to make sure are documented in your incident report. One is going to be you want specific details. So concrete information about the people who were involved, their contact information, the time, date, location, that kind of stuff for the incident. You typically want a subject line. So often, but not always, incident reports will take the form of a memo. And so a memo as a standard generic thing includes a subject line. As always with a subject line, you are describing very, very concisely the key thing that occurred. And that it should be a descriptive subject line in this case, right? So something like employee name, slip and fall on ice in parking lot, something like that, right? You can sort of decide for yourself, right? But it should be clear, right? If it just says something like injury, that's not useful, right? And part of the reason that you need that to be useful is so that people can go through. I mean, this is probably more important for sort of old school systems where these documents would be filed in paper. Companies should still be backing things up in paper. It's much smarter than depending on electronic systems. I say that in part because Canvas, which is the course management system for massive numbers of universities within the United States, was just hacked the other day from time of recording. And that created big, big problems because we are basically in finals week right now. Or actually now I'm recording this on the Saturday just after finals week, but some schools are going into finals, right? So anyway, but that's really significant. The subject line is really important because it ensures that people, A, get the most basic information, which is what a subject line always does, but it also makes it easy to identify that this is the right incident report for the issue that's being investigated. Whether, again, that's a legal investigation, a liability investigation, whatever it is. An internal investigation to revise policy, to change infrastructure, right? We need to upgrade our de-icing in the parking lot, right? You need that information, and so you need access to that information. Being able to find it, the subject line plays a big role in that. So that's what you need. You need, again, the specific details of the people involved, the location, date, time, etc., etc. You need a summary. The summary will be pretty short. I mean, that's what a summary is, right? So the summary will usually be maybe 2 to 4 sentences giving the key pieces of information about what has occurred. This is the sort of quick and dirty version of this. And the summary and the full description, or the detailed description, or whatever it is, these could be presented in objective language. And I've made a video about objectivity and subjectivity recently. And basically, that means that you are describing what occurred rather than presenting interpretations, explanations, analysis. You're not presenting an opinion about it. So in that summary, you are saying, these are the facts of what occurred. Then you will have a more detailed description, and this is going to be longer. How long it is depends on precisely what happened, right? If it's something fairly minor, Jane Jones was working in the carpentry shop and got a splinter in her finger. Medical staffer Rajit Singh removed the splinter and provided basic first aid. Like, it can be quite small like that, right? And obviously in the detailed description, you want to include things like the time, the date, the location, etc. Even though that's going to be documented generally in specific portions of the incident report, you want to incorporate all of those details so it's clear how everything fits together. But again, this is an objective description of the facts of what occurred. You may be asked to discuss the causes of what occurred, and this is going to be more subjective. This You also in the description, you may include, like, if there's interviews done, right? If there's an incident where someone was injured, you may interview witnesses or people who are directly involved, whatever it is, this kind of thing, right? So you may incorporate that information that you've gotten from witnesses, and that should be attributed to those witnesses, right? Witness Terry Jones said this thing had occurred, right? Whatever it is. If you get into a section where they're asking you about the causes of what happened, why did this incident occur? Again, this is going to include some more speculation. You're going to have to make an argument. This occurred because safety protocols about wearing work gloves on the job were not adequately enforced, right? That's not an objective statement of fact. That is an assessment. That's a judgment that you are rendering about whether or not this particular safety protocol was followed in the way that it should be. Or it might alternatively be the cause of this was that there are not safety protocols in place requiring the wearing of gloves on the job, and so that exposed the worker whose made up name I forgot, that exposed this worker to getting this splinter, right? Or the sidewalk, the parking lot was not iced in a way that would have ensured the safety of this worker who slipped and fell on the ice and broke their arm. You may also have a recommendations section. What should be done? And this can be something like what further action or investigation should be taken, or this can be something like we should enforce a company rule requiring the wearing of work gloves, or we should buy better rock salt to salt the parking lot to ensure that this does not happen again, right? And there should be a sort of direct correlation, a direct explanation of we should do this because it will prevent these problems in this way. Now, for an incident report, you generally don't have to sort of like fully develop a feasibility assessment, right? So you don't have to be like, I've priced out the right kind of rock salt that we need. Here's how much labor would be involved, right? You don't have to do that kind of thing, right? That would be a separate process, right? And the company would want to do that, right? If they're going to upgrade their rock salt or they're going to require work gloves or whatever it is, they're going to look into what's it going to take to do that. What are the costs going to be? How much labor is going to be involved? What are the requirements to make this a reality? But they're going to do that separately from the incident report because it's not within the scope of the incident report's job. The incident report's job is to say, here's what has occurred. We are documenting it. We're making sure that this information is available in case anyone needs it for any reason going forward. And again, depending on how the company, organization, institution, whatever it is, requires their incident reports be set up, it may be, here is a recommendation for what should be done. A lot of times those recommendations, you will want to root them in policy, right? So companies will have policies, they will have sets of requirements, whatever it is, right? You want to base your recommendations, especially if it's something like for disciplinary action or an investigation or something like that, you want to base those recommendations on company policy or organization policy, institutional policy, whatever it is, says that this type of incident should be dealt with in this way. So you want to talk about it in policy language. Maybe you're using language directly, maybe you're referring to section 4C of the employee handbook says that following an incident where a worker specifically damages a smoke detector, this course of action should be taken, right? So you want to make those recommendations based on what the company has said is the appropriate follow-up steps for these different kinds of situations. And again, what you're thinking about is as much as possible trying to document things objectively, but when it's something like the subjective sections, things like what were the cause of this incident, and what should be done about it, with these you want to base them on facts as much as you can. Because again, if this is necessary for a legal investigation, a liability investigation, if the company is potentially going to be held responsible, then they need that documented as concretely, specifically, and objectively as possible so that they can defend themselves and advocate for their best interests.